Before we get started with the actual tie, I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between Matt's midge and the Beaver midge we're going to tie. Now, Matt's midge doesn't hang parallel to the surface tension, it hangs downward. And this is mainly because it does not have anything to support the rear of the fly. Now, where the Beaver midge, it has dubbing, that causes it to float in the surface film at a horizontal level, unlike Matt's midge, which droops down. Now, the surface film, you can think of it as a thick piece of Glad wrap or saran wrap. Now, flies that are hackled with a tail will float on top of this, where flies that are dubbed will float in the surface film. If you want to know more about the science behind it, I have a slide clear at the end that talks about all the variations of the different parts of the fly that cause it to float differently.
In my vise, I have a Daiichi 1110 dry fly hook in a size 20. Now this is an 1 extra fine wire. I'm going to start the fly with a 14-aught black thread. We're going to start about an eyelet behind the eye. I don't want to build up a lot of material right now, right behind the eye. So we'll go down to the bend of the hook, cut off the tag. One of the challenges with a midge dry fly is to keep the point and the bend of the hook from pulling the fly down below the surface film. And the way you do that is to have a dubbing that is very buoyant. These dubbings are from aquatic animals. I'm going to use beaver. I harvest my own off of the pelt, so I have cut that smaller and removed the guard hailers, and this is dyed black. So take a very small amount, and we're going to make a very, very small, thin rope here. And probably make it about a 1/2 inch in length, and that'll be just about perfect for this size fly. So you can see I got a little rope here. It's probably about a 1.5 millimeters in diameter, which will be perfect for this size fly to give it plenty of buoyancy. We're just going to wrap that forward with touching turns, and we'll get to right where we had stopped our thread. Build up a little bit of a bubble there to support our CDC. We'll get rid of the rest of this that we're not going to use. Now, to keep the fly as light as possible, I'm using a CDC feather. We're going to stroke those forward here a little bit. We're going to use the whole feather. So bring it up underneath, on top. Make another wrap here. And we'll pull this guy for our wing. Just about right there, and then we'll cut that off. Now for these tiny flies, what I like to do to cut off my CDC so I won't have any sticking up out of the eye here, we'll just take a razor blade and cut that. And we can cut our wing to length at this time. I prepared a black hackle feather for a size 20 dry fly. We're going to set that across the top at a 45-degree angle. We're going to tie that in. Now I'm going to do a half hitch here. If you haven't seen my video on how to properly do half hitches using a half hitch tool, it's a worthwhile video to watch. Now, you don't have to heavily hackle these. We're just going to do 2 turns. One. And a completed turn at the top gives us 2. And we'll go over it, tied it in. And again. And again, so I don't cut off any of my barbs that I want to keep on there, I'll take a little razor blade, pull it up against and cut that guy off. And we'll just take our half hitch tool, kind of push things back. Okay, and we'll do another half hitch. And then a double half hitch. For these flies, I like using a super glue. This is a Zap-A-Gap. Super glue doesn't add a lot of weight to the fly. Okay.
If you look at the 3 components of a dry fly, the tail, the dubbing, and the hackle, each one plays a different part on how the fly floats. The hackle, when wrapped, will keep the fly on top of the surface film. The dubbing, which is buoyant, usually has to lie within the water or in the surface film to float. And then the tail, which will float the fly on top of the surface film. If you have a fly like the Adams that has a tail and hackle and regardless of what the dubbing is, it'll float on top of the film. If you have a dubbing only fly, and this would be like the Comparidons, that's going to float in the surface film. If you have a fly that's entirely hackled, that will float on top of the surface film like the Griffith gnat. And if you have a fly that has hackle but no tail and no dubbing, it's going to hang down from the front of the fly to the rear of the fly at an angle, sort of like an emerger. And this is what Matt's midge does.